this morning and say, caution, God working ahead. You may be seated. Thank you. I borrow this from the seafarers. If you ever join the seafarers ministry and go on board a ship, they will be glad to give you a hard hat. But I thought, since we're building something this morning, I went and borrowed one from them. When I think of stones as building blocks, I actually usually think of walls. You know, maybe those kinds of walls that you see, especially if you're up in the New England area, running between properties and along the sides of roads that mark off the lines and the boundaries, one family's property from another. And they're usually fairly low walls. Often they have gates or steps or some way for you to get across them. They're not easy. They're not difficult to get across. They're not meant to keep people from traversing from one side to the other. They're just meant to be markers and boundaries. But then there are also other kinds of stones that are used to build walls that are with a different purpose. Walls that are made to separate, walls that are built as a barrier. You know, I'm getting an echo as I'm speaking with this. So you'll forgive me. It's like it's all coming right back to me. It's not a bad thing, but still. But walls that are built to separate, walls that are made as barriers to keep people, or maybe it's livestock, or whatever it is, to keep a separation from one side to the other. My first experience of that ever was as a child when we were visiting family in Germany. And so yes, I'm talking about the Berlin Wall, which of course was strongest in Berlin, but really continued through the whole countryside. Its most visible sign dividing that city was an 11 to 13 foot high cement wall that stretched for 28 miles through the city, and you couldn't get from one side to the other. It kept people who were on the eastern side of Germany from crossing over into the western side, though the government in Germany broadcast that the reason that they built the wall was to keep undesirable Westerners from coming into our part of the world. Today we would call that fake news. Right? There were ways to get across the wall. You had to have the right paperwork. You had to have the correct documents. Everything had to be signed by the proper authorities. But if you didn't have those, and if you were trying to get across, and let me tell you, everybody who tried was trying to get from the east to the west, you were likely to be killed. Many died trying. Many more actually succeeded by ways that are amazing testaments to the power of human will and desire to be free. My own family was one that was separated by the wall. We had family on both sides of the divided wall in Germany. Until, of course, November of 1989, when the wall was finally breached as a result of things that were happening in the world. Some of you may remember the word glasnost, as there was an opening in the Soviet Union, and in fact, of course, the Soviet Union and its bloc of Soviet countries began to crumble. An unrest that arose even as people of faith were gathering in churches, even Lutheran churches in Leipzig and other cities. They were gathering together. I think of it as a holy unrest, perhaps, that began to gather some strength and some force and some storm. And as they began to gather together and to say, we need something more. It's interesting, I hadn't realized this before, but as I was doing some research, I found out that the actual first opening of the Berlin Wall was actually done by mistake. The border guard who was in charge of that particular gate was overwhelmed by the crowds that were coming and that were pushing. And he was also dealing with some personal things. He had just had some tests that were done. He was waiting for a cancer screening to come back the next day, and he was filled with anxiety, and somehow God used all of that, and he opened up the door, and the gate could not be closed again. And you know the rest of the story as people came through and walked to their freedom. I was able to pick up a piece of that wall in 1990. When I say pick up a piece, I mean by that time people were selling parts of the wall. And so I bought a part of the wall, a small part, and in 1995, when I was a seminary student, I had the opportunity to travel with Elvis to Cuba as part of a religious delegation. That was the only way Americans really could travel to Cuba at that time, and I took it with me as part of a seminary class. We were part of a religious delegation. We were hosted by a church in Havana, in Maguinao we were in. And we met the people of Havana while we were there. And somehow, I don't know what caused me to take that stone. It was one of the last things I went back into the house for before I left from Columbus, Ohio at the time. I was at Trinity Seminary. And I took that piece of stone with me. Just something in my spirit that said, do that. I was amazed how similar things in Eastern Germany had been to the way things were in Cuba, the sense of everything was kind of gray and dark and oppressed. But there was something in me that said, if a stone wall could be taken down and the stones liberated like the one that I had in my hand, and the people behind the wall could be liberated in East Germany, maybe the same could be true in Cuba one day. And before I left Cuba, I ended up giving that stone to a young man who had hosted us in the time that we were there as a sign to say that living stones can be broken down from walls and built into something new. Because as we read the scripture this morning, we find out that God has something else in mind with stones. When we build walls, God's saying that's not what it's about. In fact, God starts by saying that we are the stones. We are living stones. That God desires to build us into a structure. But notice what the structure is. Because it's not a wall that separates, but rather it's a house. Not just any house, but a spiritual house. And so we hear the words that are in Peter. It says, come to him, come to God, a living stone, though rejected by mortals, yet precious and chosen and precious in God's sight. And like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house. Let yourselves be built into a spiritual house. You know what that tells me? It tells me that God is doing the work. We're on the construction site, but God is doing the work. God is calling us as stones, not to be barriers, not to be blockers, not to be walls that separate, but rather to be living stones that build up a place of family, a place of community, a place for worship, a place for gathering together as we are today, building up a spiritual house. And folks, look around you. We are that house. Not brick and mortar, but human flesh and blood. And we are under construction, right? Construction site is we ourselves. God isn't finished with us yet, but God is working on us and building us into that which He wants us to be. We are called to host all peoples, to become ambassadors of God's great love that He has for all the world, to share hospitality with others. Not to separate ourselves from the world, but to engage ourselves with the working of the world, and in such a way that we share with others the love of God. You say, well, Pastor, I can't do that on my own. No, you don't have to. Because not only does God do the work, but God gives us the identity, calls us as children of God. It says in 2 Peter, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, called out by God to be a people of God, that God uses for the purpose of building up the kingdom of God. Not just in the future, in the by and by. That's how so many people read the gospel text that we heard this morning, Jesus preparing a place for us. But even right here, right now, we are joined to Christ, the chief cornerstone, the stone that had been rejected by the builders, but in whom now we are all grounded and anchored and a part of. We become a people who were once not a people. We receive God's mercy in our lives. We who had once not received mercy, and when we receive it, we become agents of that mercy to share it with others. So, Pastor, you ask, what does that look like? Well, to begin with, why do you think God gave us mothers? God gave us mothers because they have been among the chief architects. While historically men have built cities and fortresses and palaces and walls, mothers have been raising up families and imparting values and sharing God's love. So they have been the architects of that building structure, that building that is taking place that you cannot see with human eyes until you know it inside of your life. So I invite you, mothers, put on a hard hat. Well, sometimes you're going to need it, right? Sometimes it's going to be a tough going. But put on a hard hat and don't worry if it messes up the hair for a moment, but be able to walk in that strength. I want to share with you this morning, just quickly, the work of a friend of mine. She's become a friend of mine. Her name is Roberta Shevin. She is the executive director of a group called MCCJ, which stands for the Miami Coalition of Christians and Jews. And they don't even use the full name because they've now expanded to be the coalition of even others as well. So we have Muslim members, and we have Unitarian and all kinds who are coming together. She has had a vision that she now shares, and that is now being called Connect Miami. And as a mother, as a woman of God, as a child of God, she envisions people in the whole community of Miami. And I think Broward, we're close enough to be called part of that, right? We're in the same region. To do some very simple things to build up the house that God is building. And so the invitation, if you look in your newsletter or in your bulletin, there's more information about Connect Miami. The invitation is this: in the last 10 days of May, beginning May 22nd through the 31st, to take a moment and invite somebody. Invite somebody to a conversation. Invite somebody over for a meal. Invite somebody over to share some time of yourself and their self. There's only one provision. It needs to be somebody that you don't know. Somebody who is, can we put it in quotes, different than we are, different than you are. Somebody that you need to get to know on a deeper level. If you need an idea for a way to do that, look in your bulletin. We put, I mean, in your newsletter rather, we put in 10 ways, 10 ideas that you can use. Some simple things, even maybe sharing an opportunity to mow somebody's grass or bring them a plant or something to open up a conversation with somebody you don't know. An invitation to reach out to those we don't know or don't know well who are different from us. Maybe a different race, maybe a different ethnic culture, maybe a different religion, someone who is not the same as ourselves. And in those last 10 days of May, to take that as a challenge, as an invitation to let ourselves be built up into a spiritual house that is the house of God. God is working ahead. You might even want to go to the seafarer's house. I told him I'd use the helmet as a commercial as well, right? You might want to go to the seafarer's house. Bryony, you've been putting on a nurse's hat to take care of her one and only patient, her Ben. She's here this morning with her mom for Mother's Day. God is building through us something new and beautiful and is binding it together with love. So put on your hats and let us serve God together in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.